But all of those things we're still in the paper century partly. A little bit with Word, a little bit with Excel, all over the place. So this is where integrated contract management solutions, easy to use, which is important, can be of a big help.
Hi, I am Guru Venkatesan, and I would like to welcome you all to this episode of Clause and Effect, a podcast series presented by SimpliContract. Joining us today is Robert Walder, Senior Executive Leader in Procurement and Operations with over 25 years of cross-functional industry experience across Europe. Robert is based in Amsterdam and is the founder of Sourcing Champions, a boutique strategy and consulting firm that focus on global sourcing and procurement, consulting and advisory. Robert has done multiple roles in his career as a Chief of Procurement, Vice President of Procurement, managing over about 2.5 billion euros of procurement category, has served as a Chief Operating Officer and managed a P&L of about 100 million euros. And in his corporate life, he spent about 18 plus years at Philips corporate headquarters, where he created and built very large, high-performing procurement teams across countries. Robert, glad you could join us on this podcast. Can't wait to dive deep and discuss the world of contracting and procurement.
Yes, Guru. I'm also very happy to be here on this podcast with you, especially now that Sourcing Champions and SimpliContract are working so closely together.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Robert. Yeah, to start, interestingly, we come from completely the opposite ends of our specialization, right? All through my 25 years of corporate, I've been in sales. And any sales guy you ask, the nightmare would be dealing with procurement and dealing with contracts and procurement.
Yes, I recognize that. And it's, but at the end of the day, Guru, we need to make a deal. Sales and procurement have to come and make a deal and finally get the contracts done. But before you do that, very often takes quite a number of rounds before we find a common ground, so to say.
Agree, completely agree. So, if I have to share some of my anecdotes on the sales side, where I've always been dealing with procurement, right? So there are multiple things that organizations could find as a challenge for not having a contract lifecycle management product in place, right? It could be, something like lacking agility in sales contracting. How fast, once you close a deal with a customer, how fast you contract. It could be something like tracking some of the contractual commitments, what we committed to customer, how are we measuring on that. Some of the other areas like ability to get contractual information or so-called contractual data, right? Like sort of key milestones, what we have, what are those clauses that we have agreed. And of course, the last but not the least and super critical is how compliant are we in our contracts, right? This, all through my career, I've seen this and, a lot of emphasis across the large corporations I've worked across. How do you see some of these in the procurement world?
Yeah. If you look at the procurement teams that I've had the privilege of working with, and we see that now that since 11 years, Sourcing Champions is actively advising companies to strengthen their procurement and contract management. First of all, the creation of the contracts is something that is still a lot on the back burner. So a negotiation takes place. Very often negotiations are done on a Friday afternoon still, where there are big negotiations to be done. So preparation is very key. And if you do it well, you take the contractual topics already with you in a negotiation process from the beginning. But that doesn't happen very often. So that means that when you come to the end of the negotiation, there's still quite a long contracting phase to make sure that all the clauses, all the elements are really well structured. So I think here is where procurement can really win time, if done already at the start of a tender process, at the start of an RFP process, to have the contractual elements as part of the journey. It will, and working together with the legal teams and with our sales counterparts will, it will speed up things tremendously and also increase the quality. That for one thing. And then once contracts are in place, this is very often an area where then procurement is no longer involved. And you very often see the roles of contract managers, for example, in IT or in larger construction projects, etc. And whereas in the vision of Sourcing Champions, in my vision over the years, also that is an important procurement role exactly, is to manage your suppliers, is to manage your contracts and to be very clear what has been agreed, what are the key obligations and all the elements that are inside of could be 100 million, 1 billion or multi-billion contracts that we are talking about. And to do that well, to make this seamless integration, once you have agreed on the contracts, then you still understand very well what obligations you actually have started. But all of those things we're still in the paper century, partly. A little bit with Word, a little bit with Excel, all over the place. So it's this is where integrated contract management solutions, easy to use, which is important, can be of a big help.
Absolutely. I think, you bring in a great point, right? Like, both of us see CLM has to be, or is going to be the next wave of ERP, right? Like, there's no company without an ERP. Both of us as organization, we fundamentally believe CLM is going to be the next ERP that enterprises need to embrace or adopt, right? If you look at the customer maturity model, we define it as, if you draw a pyramid, right? The bottom of the pyramid on your CLM maturity is how do you get your baseline of contracting, which is you have one single repository where you are able to store and retrieve contracts. That's the baseline of starting your CLM journey, right? So today, I'm sure in the procurement world, they say the best place where we find the contracts is in our table drawer or at max in a document management system, right? So the next step that we see on as a logical maturity to the next stage is about how do you automate your contract authoring process, right? Today it happens in an email. There's nothing beyond an email where they do a contract authoring. Is there a way companies can embrace a simple workflow solution that could help them to, collaborate with multiple stakeholders, collaborate externally with their vendors, and help vendor contracting make it smooth and make it a very agile process, right? So that's how the maturity goes. As you go towards the top of the pyramid is about the once the contracts are done, how do you measure your vendor performance, right? Are the vendors delivering what they committed? That goes back to what you said, the contract management. That's the most critical element of a vendor-customer relationship or the quality of the engagement, so to speak, right? I think that's a great point you brought up.
So Guru, we just did. I personally, we just finished a very large negotiation on a software package. So in IT, and we had to do the negotiation with one of the large software vendors. And what you could see with the company that we were supporting, first of all, is we needed to find back what were the old contracts. So that was already a challenge. And then there were contract proposals coming from the vendor, and they were also multiple subcontracts, which was unclear how they were connected with each other. So this started a significant process of communication internally in the company between the legal representatives and procurement about how the clauses should be. This was all done on Word and email, etc. And then was the communication with the software vendor about all these clauses. So this took us like 1.5 months of different versions, different clauses, very difficult to track. So it was just, and this is, I think, what procurement's team, they come across still every day.
Absolutely. I can't agree more on that point that you brought up. Right? It's a very interesting, personal anecdotal example you brought up. Another case I wanted to talk about, which we recently engaged with one of the largest public sector customer. Right. So these customers have this particular customer in this point has probably a 13, 14-year old long contract with a vendor and that runs probably a few hundred million currencies worth it. The vendor has promised multiple things, or contractually there are multiple obligations that's been agreed between this customer, public sector customer who's using public money to help citizens to lead a better, lead a better life. But unfortunately, the people, both sides, the customer and vendor, have changed multiple times in the last 6 years of the contract. Nobody has the full view of what's coming up, what's missed out, what is overdue, who's accountable, and who's responsible. Every time there is a change, the change management takes about 6 months. So that's the kind of complexity the contractual relationship has. But unfortunately, there is no way you can solve this by just putting people behind this. The whole knowledge is a tribal knowledge with people, right? People change. Somebody comes in for them to understand the contractual obligations, what's due when. Takes another 3 to 4 months, right? So within this 4 months, there are few hundred obligations both sides that's missed out. So the whole contract management, running manual with Excel sheets, I think those days are probably numbered unless there is. We feel that there is a solid tailwind of many organizations trying to bring in technology. Especially, I would say there's a lot of technical debt. The legal process, has got to cover up with, right? Unlike any other functions like let's say like a marketing or a finance. In procurement, the predominant focus has been more around the procurement solutions around the upstream, downstream procurement, with not too much emphasis around the contracting side, which I feel is something pretty important.
Yeah. And it's also, I think, maybe one of the elements that came out of the pandemic is of course that risk management is something that was always somewhat on the agenda of CPOs, but through the pandemic, of course, we have seen that the risks, the supply chain risk, has become higher and higher, and that's also where procurement teams need to go back and look at their contracts, their supply contracts, because of lack of supply. Say what are commitments that do exist between the supplier and the company, and all these risks need to be managed much more digitally. And the pandemic has really taught us that it's important for procurement to step up in risk management in all our risk scenarios, and the contracts risk is an important one on that risk map. So in response to your question, that's, I think, if there's one thing that has been on their mind of the CPOs over the last 1.5 years, has been how can I manage all these risks, and what are the risks that I actually don't know yet. And if it goes from contracts have expired and I didn't know, but I still need the products from my vendors because otherwise I cannot produce. Until what specific obligations are there where suppliers might not meet our elements. So this whole risk management notion is for CPOs top of mind, and that also triggers them to look across the whole sourcing strategy to contract space at making sure that all the systems are more robust. And but the one thing that puts procurement teams often not to engage too quickly into new tools is that they have been working with tools in the past that were very complex to use. There were ERP systems for the past that it took quite a long time to get to learn. Whereas we need simple tools that they can use every day, like it's part of their teams, it's part of their words, but in a digital environment that makes them help. That's when we look at advising into solutions for companies, we very strongly look at the user acceptance, the easy of use.
It's a very interesting point, right? Most of these business users look for a very simple solution that, because they got to use this day in, day out, and they want it to be a lot more intuitive and user driven. I mean, interestingly, now that you said CLM plays a very strategic impact on the procurement side, one question, if I may ask, right? Do you see any industry-wise differences, or any industry adopting faster because of the complexities, because of the pandemic compared to any other industry? Do you see any patterns or any thoughts around that, Robert?
I think the pandemic and the risk actually have touched many companies, but for sure the industrial companies, where you needed to get supply from different regions, and borders were blocked. Whole ships could not come out of Shanghai into Europe, for example. So it's especially in the industrial side, but in every side where you need the physical components to build something. So the building, the construction industry. So it's really broad across many sectors, I must say. So that is where CPOs who are active in those industries would focus on it, Guru.
That's a very interesting point. Given the pandemic and the borders being closed, manufacturing really had a downtime, and hopefully things look back better for all of us in the segment, right? So, any thoughts about technology? We feel, like I said, right? So this procurement and contracting has been long underserved from a technology perspective. All of the investments, all of the innovation happened on the sales, transformation, or marketing transformation, or finance transformation, lesser on the contracting and the so-called procurement transformation. How do you think technology can be a differentiator or a big enabler in solving some of the inherent problems that large procurement teams have been facing?
I think for procurement teams, everything starts with data. And if you have large corporations where data is in very multiple ERP systems across the different regions, for central category teams, this is still very difficult to manage. So if you are responsible for, as I was in the past, for the whole outsourcing at the large multinational, you need to have the overview of what is spent across the globe. And there, with these multiple systems, nowadays there are really good tools that with artificial intelligence can pull out data at a really good both aggregated level, but also at an item level, so that you can manage the global spend in a much better way. But it can only be done through these systems that work on artificial intelligence, new technology, easily connecting of different systems. And I'm happy to see that. So that's where it starts with procurement. And the same applies to building strategies, and from strategies to contract. How can you, on the one hand, create more efficiency, so to do it faster, because the challenge of procurement organization is also to do it with less people, so that they are more efficient. But at the end of the day, the real procurement teams are there to be strategically stronger, to make stronger decisions, to make different decisions. And for that you need information. If you have a repository of contracts, how can you get decision-making information out of that? That is what procurement teams need. It needs to be ready, available. It needs to be in their face. If they wake up in the morning and open their systems, their strategic information needs to come out, and they need to work on it. It's really fantastic.
Like they say, data is the new currency. I mean, you brought in a very interesting point, right? So when I was in sales, running large teams or sales, I used to hate my CRM, right? You go to a sales guy and say, "Here is a tool, go start using." We never liked it. But I really pity the world, right? Because there are many tools. You use an upstream platform, you have a downstream procurement tool, there are some ERP, there are some vendor management tools. I'm sure there are many more that beyond what I could comprehend, right? Bringing in another CLM and asking a buyer team or a procurement team to create contracts, something out of it. I'm not sure if how would anyone in the procurement team would look at it, right? Plus, second is if you have to look at any of this data from one system flowing into other system, and probably getting you to correlate multiple data from multiple systems and help you to make informed business decision needs quite a bit of technology, so to speak. uh, any thoughts from your past experience you have about how these are being solved by some of the players that you work with?
Yeah, that's a good question, Guru. So for CPOs, they need to make some choices, and somehow there is, first of all, this choice between do I choose one integrated system that can do all, that has financials, that has purchase orders, that has contracts. Is there such a system? So yes, there are systems that can cover quite a lot. On the other hand, you have all what is called best of breed solution. So the best possible contract system, or the best possible category strategy system, or the best possible tender and auction system. There are quite a few out there. What to choose? Which direction to go? So my personal conviction is that there's so much depth and knowledge in these best of breed solutions out there that you would be stupid as procurement not to use that. And as these systems now can talk quite easily with each other, so the integration can be easily done. So you need to connect these systems where it's needed, but really get all the best technology and the best processes out of there. So as a CPO, that would be my choice instead of going for a really integrated everything, which is okay, but not the best. And in procurement, we need the best. So that's my view on the world at this point in time, Guru.
Robert, thank you so much for the time. And thank you so much for all the insights. I think your experience is invaluable.
And indeed, we look forward to, our mission is to make sure that all procurement teams and also sales team become sourcing champion. We go that journey. Thanks a lot for this podcast.
So listeners, that was Robert Walder giving us deep insights into the world of procurement and how efficient contracting can be beneficial for solving various procurement and business challenges. CLM tools today hold an immense depth of knowledge, and it's only wise for procurement teams to adapt the right solution and use them as competitive advantage. Those were some solid anecdotes from Robert's personal experience over the years. We have many such interesting conversations lined up with industry leaders in the upcoming episodes. So stay tuned and catch us on the next episode of Clause and Effect. Subscribe to the podcast and visit us at SimpliContract.com for more information.